While it is nice to see the lighter side of humans sharing their lives with animals, we must not be ignorant to its darker side. Every day, hundreds of animals in Fiji endure some form of cruelty. And while there are more obvious forms, there are also ways in which people do not realize that they're neglecting the basic needs of their pets. Animal cruelty is a topic that must be addressed, and we must continue to be the voice for those who cannot speak our human language, because animals do have a voice, just one that we need to learn to understand. Now, in light of the recent cases of animal cruelty that have surfaced through the internet, tonight's episode may be confronting to some and enlightening to others. Viewer discretion is advised. Never believe that animals suffer less than humans. Pain is the same for them that it is for us. Even worse, because they cannot help themselves. Louis C. Kamudi. Now, whilst there are many different forms of animal abuse, let's break down some of the more common ones. The first is neglect. You may not realize or mean it, but here are some ways in which you could be neglecting your pet.
There are different forms of abuse, and neglect is a form of abuse. If you don't feed your animals, if you don't feed your kids, that's neglect. That's abuse to animals and to children. Neglect is neglecting their basic needs, and that can be food and water and shelter and socialization, the major needs. So there are sort of three main, very life-giving things that you do for your animals. One is always provide fresh water. You have to provide your animals with fresh water all the time. You start when they're young puppies. They won't drink it all when they're young puppies much at all, but gradually they need to have access to fresh water. Clean your bucket out every day. Give them a nice big bucket of water. Give them water. The next thing's food. We know that we go to the fridge. We know mom or whoever makes our food every day. We need to eat every day, and so do they. They have to have food every day. Everybody's different as to what they can afford to feed their animals, but do the best you can. Come and talk to us at SPCA if you're not sure what's good to feed your animal or what you should be feeding your animal, but they need food every day. You can't let them go hungry. Don't let people go hungry. We know kids going hungry every day is not right. So by the same token, it's not right for the animals to go hungry either. You need to feed them. You need to provide fresh water, you need to feed them, and they need shelter from the hot sun, from the pouring rain, and from the muddy ground. So they need to have that as well. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just needs to be some shelter and some protection. Those are the three main requirements so that you're not neglecting your dogs particularly.
The second is hoarding. Hoarding is when you have too many animals in your care that you become unable to care for them all properly. This could mean not being able to provide them with enough food or even medical care.
Animal hoarders has been linked with mental health issues. But really it's kind-hearted people who see animals in distress. They see them on the street starving, they need medical care, and they take them in. Usually that's what it is. It's not usually any other way. They take them in and they feel bad for them, and they take more and more and more of them in because they see them out on the street, and then pretty soon they have way too many animals and they can't look after them, and the animals end up being in the same circumstance as what they've taken them from. That's hoarding. It comes from a good heart, but it ends up causing a repeat of the same problem.
Now let's talk about hunting for sport. Now, while this may not be a significant problem here in Fiji, it does still happen. And it doesn't necessarily have to be sport related, but we often hear about people using pellet guns even to injure animals.
Sport hunting is going out for sport. Well, what do we do sports for? Entertainment, value, competition. So sport hunting, and perhaps we can even add sport fishing in there. Sport hunting is just killing things for sport. And I think we've gone past that now. When you kill something, you should be doing it for eating. It's for food. You shouldn't be doing it for the enjoyment of killing something. You should find a rugby game or a soccer game or a tennis match if you want to get involved with sports.
Pitting animals against each other for sport has been illegal for many years, but blood sports like dogfighting and cockfighting are still happening. You may be surprised to learn that there are people who actually participate in blood sport gambling, where they bet money on the animal they think will most likely win. This is an incredibly selfish and cruel sport whereby many animals are severely injured, mutilated, and many a times killed. The animals that do survive are not given any professional medical treatments for the horrific injuries that they sustain during the fights.
Other animal cruelty, I guess you would call it, is fighting. They use roosters and they use dogs. That's probably the most commonly known one. And again, it's for sport. It's so people can bet on them and have some enjoyment out of it. But you know, honestly, how can you get enjoyment out of watching animals mutilate each other or fight each other to the death or fight each other to terrible trauma? There can't be enjoyment out of that. And you know, I guess in the United States, the dogfighting ring with the football player was made very prominent when he got taken to court, taken to task. And rightly so. We shouldn't get enjoyment out of dogs or animals or birds or whatever fighting. You know, I guess that sort of leads into some other things like mutilation and beating animals. So if people are beating animals, what kind of enjoyment can you get out of that? Really, there's something wrong with people if that's the enjoyment they get. They need to go find a better sport.
In Fiji, we often see dogs and cats with mutilated body parts. Most commonly, we see dogs with their tails, nose or ears cut off, mainly for pig hunting reasons. As Dr. Joe explains further, none of those methods assist in better working dogs, and they are extremely unnecessary and cruel.
Mutilation means removing body parts of an animal that's part of the animal. Removing parts that are part of the animal. They're there for a purpose. The animal doesn't have ears and nose and tail for no reason. There's a reason for that. Tails in dogs are a means of communication. God made ears, if you want to say that. God made ears so that they can actually hear better. People chopping off their ears doesn't make them hear better. The fashionable thing to do for decades was to chop off ears of fighting dogs, and we kind of go full circle, don't we, with all these cruelty things. You can't improve a dog's sense of smell, if you're talking about pig hunting dogs, by chopping off their nose. You can't improve their sense of hearing by chopping off their ears. That kind of dramatic trauma to the dog does not improve their senses. It's cruel and unusual punishment, and it's misguided in what they're trying to do with it. So that's what I have to say about mutilation.
Now let's talk about burning or scalding. Growing up in Fiji, I myself witnessed and heard many stories of people throwing hot water on animals that were a nuisance to them. This could mean that stray or even neighborhood pets entering unfenced yards of other people, or making too much noise at night, or making a mess of their trash, annoyed someone so much that the person just had to throw boiling hot water on them. Remember, there is always a kinder way of dealing with such situations. If you wouldn't want hot water thrown on yourself, never injure an animal with it, as they too feel pain.
Unfortunately, here at SPCA, we have animals turned in that are owned, or we get stray animals in that have had hot water thrown on them. That's the most common burn that we see. I've said before, if you must throw hot water on a cat because it's marking at your door, throw water on it, but don't waste the energy and make it hot and cause pain. Anybody who's had a burn knows how much that hurts, and you see these huge burns on the backs of these cats, particularly in some dogs. That hurts. We've seen burned feet too. I suspect probably the cats and the dogs are being forced or tossed into Lovo pits or fire burning pits of some sort, and the pads of their feet are burned off, and that's just not fun. Seriously, you need to go and have sports. You need to go and redirect that misguided energy away from abusing an animal that can't defend itself, and go find something more useful to do than that.
Hit by cars. Another common problem in Fiji are speeding vehicles and careless drivers who hit animals with their vehicles, either on purpose or by having absolutely no regard for an animal's life and well-being as they decide to drive carelessly on roads that we also share with animals. Just over the weekend, I witnessed a taxi driver hit a dog, get out of his car to check on his own bumper for damages, and then casually drove away. It was an absolute shock for me to see the lack of regard for a dog that could have potentially been horribly injured or even deceased. Unfortunately, I could not locate the dog as it ran away, but in most cases, you would later find these dogs unable to move in a ditch close by where they bleed or starve to death. Now, we understand that not all cases of hit and runs are the driver's fault. Sometimes, just like people, animals cross the road at unfortunate times and it's too late for drivers to maneuver away. But in most cases, they are completely avoidable. And even if it does happen, it is our duty to help the animal as best as we can and get them to a vet.
So we have this cute little term called bumped. A lot of people use, and they say, oh, my dog was bumped by a car. Or people will see vehicles running into animals on the street and then they drive off. That's hit and run. These are vehicle accidents, car accidents, hit by car. We call it lots of things, and people call it cutely bumped here. It's not cute. Anybody who's had their animal have severe trauma from that, it causes broken backs. We go out frequently and pick dogs up out of the ditch. They've been hit by a car and the car is long gone and they've just left them. And if they crawl into the drain, if nobody sees them, that's where they die. And they don't just die immediately commonly. They spend some time there and they die. So I can't imagine anybody thinking that that's a nice way for an animal to die. If you do have a vehicle, please do everything you can to avoid hitting animals on the street. Imagine every one of those animals are little kids, and if you see a child's face every time, you'll slow down or you'll do what you have to do to avoid them. We don't need to have so many of those, and we don't need to have so many of those vehicle traumas. People who have come in here recently with dogs that have been bumped will tell you there's lots of them out there.
Stabbing. Cane knife attacks are another horrible form of animal cruelty that we often hear about or see in Fiji. Now, if you wouldn't want any part of your body hacked by a cane knife, don't do that to an animal.
We have at SPCA seen cases, and there was one, the most horrible one that I saw was one fairly close by. 3 dogs had been attacked by someone with a cane knife. One was dead. One had such severe injury that we had to amputate a leg, and the other one had less severe injury, but nevertheless a significant injury that we treated. Now, I just can't imagine someone with a weapon in their hands, and a cane knife is a weapon, and I can't imagine why one would think that you'd have to whack away at a dog or a cat and think that that was okay to be cutting at them. Especially if they're not really bothering you and you just have something against the owner or something against whatever the circumstance is. So again, we're talking about animals that don't have any way to defend themselves. What animal goes around carrying a cane knife? It can fight back. It can't. So that's not fair, and it's, again, that's cruelty to do that.
Before we go on a short break, let's talk about another really common form of animal cruelty, which is poisoning. Recently, there have been a lot of cases of dogs being poisoned in large numbers, specifically in Lautoka. For as long as we, the people of Fiji, can remember, I am certain that we have all experienced a loss of a pet through the heartless act of poisoning by either authorities, annoyed farmers, or angry neighbors alike. Poisoning animals is not the solution. Killing dogs and cats through means of poison does nothing to lessen the population of these stray or wandering animals. It only ensures a slow and extremely painful death for these poor animals who have done absolutely nothing wrong and are just trying to survive in a world in which we have domesticated them.
So, of course, one that's fairly commonly talked about, and lots of times we get sick animals in here and people will say, my dog's been poisoned. Sometimes that's true. For many years we had to deal with, the veterinary clinics all over Fiji had to deal with paraquat poisoning. We still are dealing with paraquat poisoning, even though it has been made illegal in this country since 2020. We still are seeing signs of it, and now we're seeing signs of newer and different poisons. Not sure what they are. Significant amount are seizures and neurologic toxicities, but there's others as well. You know, again, there's got to be better ways to control the dog population and to get along with your neighbor's dog than tossing poison so they die, or tossing it out on the street so a bunch of them die, or however they get access to it. It's just a terrible way for animals to die, and most of the time they do, and it's a horrible death. And I'm quite sure that one of the reasons that paraquat was made illegal in this country and many others, including mine, is because when you get it, there is no treatment, whether you're a person or a dog or whatever animal. There's no treatment for it. So find some other way to get rid of your dog problem, and not by poisoning them.
This is where we all need to understand the importance of desexing our pets if you do not want to see strays, hungry, or injured animals. Being hurt by seeing these animals murdered through poison is not enough if you yourself have not desexed your pets. The only humane form of animal population control is through desexing. We'll talk more on that soon, but coming up after this, social media videos depicting animal cruelty that have surfaced and what the people are doing about it. Tonight we're breaking down the different forms of animal abuse and cruelty. Some we may witness openly, some behind closed doors, and some uploaded to the internet. Just last week, 2 separate users uploaded videos to their social media accounts, presumably thinking that abusing animals on camera would be funny and get them attention and likes on platforms such as TikTok.
Recently, there's been a couple of videos show up on social media, and I'm not a follower very much at all of social media, but lots and lots of people are. And 2 particular ones have a very specific kind of cruelty about them. One is a fella throwing a cat, and another one is capturing a dog in between a bucket and a trash bin and thinking that's funny to trap that dog into that sort of prison of that ilk, and the dog can't escape it until that person lets them go. I just fail to see how they can get humor or enjoyment out of that. I guess I'm of the age where I fail to see social media being used as a means of producing videos that torment and are cruel and torture animals for a bunch of people to like you or to like your video. Where do you get the accolades with that? That just doesn't mesh with how I think about things at all. One of the things that I think about when I see those videos is the one particular is fairly young people, and they've learned from a young age that it's okay to torment or torture an animal that can't fight back, is too small or too young to fight back. And there's lots of research out there that ties in animal cruelty and violence towards animals and domestic violence. And I can't really speak a lot about domestic violence, except I see a lot of it written about, and I am personally aware of it happening on occasion close to my life. And you know, the thing about young people growing up with that and thinking that that's a normal way to behave, to beat up on animals, to abuse animals, to be cruel to animals, and it just segues right into your spouse, your girlfriend, your children, and there's such a close tie there. That is researched and known very intimately and extensively. So I think it behooves all of us, especially the adults, to stop that. Teach your kids to have a respect for the living things. We're talking about climate change, we're talking about the environment, and it starts at home with having some respect for those animals and those creatures that share our life, and we should be enjoying their antics and enjoying them. If you don't like cats and dogs, that's fair enough. You just distance yourself from them. You don't make them an object of cruelty and of some weird sense of enjoyment or playfulness. That's not the way to go. Teach your kids to go do sports or go paint or take music or do something like that, something that's useful in their life. The playful thing, toss the puppy in the air, what you think is playful is not playful to the puppy. It's very scary and traumatic to the puppy. And that simple little thing, and it might be a small kid doing that, if it doesn't get stopped when they're small, then pretty soon they're punching and they're beating with sticks and they're throwing stones at them and they're doing all that stuff. And if they learn and they build on that behavior and nobody stops that behavior, then it segues into worse things as they get older. Worse things to animals and worse things to people. So I think we, as a society, not just in Fiji, it's all over the world, we need to really start doing something about that. The videos, shame on those guys for those videos.
Abusing animals is neither cool nor is it funny. As mentioned by Dr. Joe, this is the kind of disturbing behavior that leads to other forms of domestic violence towards humans. There is a famous quote by Martin Luther King that reads, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." So, if you see something, say something. Children especially need to be taught right versus wrong, and as we groom our next generation, we encourage parents to be more vigilant when it comes to disciplining children whilst handling animals. And speaking of being vigilant, let's talk about the telltale signs of animals that are being abused.
So signs, what do you look for? How do you know? Some people don't grow up with cats and dogs and they're really not sure what to look for. Is that animal actually abused, or is this just a happy, healthy animal somebody's turned out from their yard and it's trotting down the street? If you see ribs, if you see hip bones, if you see more bones than any other body structure, then that animal's malnourished. That animal hasn't had enough food to stay nutritionally complete. You always worry about water. You never put an animal in a circumstance where it does not have access to fresh water. We need to tie our animals sometimes to keep them safe. For example, if you open your gate, you should get your dog accustomed to being tied in that temporary situation so that it doesn't run out on the road and get hit by a car. That's perfectly okay. Should you tie your animal 24 hours a day for a month in and month out and they never get off the chain? No. And we know about lots of chain and rope stories around necks and that cuts into the skin, and that of course is abuse or cruelty as well. So the tied dogs, the dogs that are in a small little pen their entire life and they never get to run around and play, yes, you should put them in a small pen, particularly at night. It's bedtime, they're gonna sleep, that's fine, but they have to get up, they have to run and play and have exercise and socialization. So those are important things. When you see the dog, you can see their demeanor, you can see their body condition. Lots of ribs, that's probably what we notice more than anything, but hip bones, if people are watching for that. It's a little harder to tell if they're dehydrated and not getting water, but if a dog's tied up and there's no bowls evident there and there's no shelter, that's a sign of cruelty. You shouldn't have a dog if that's how you want to keep it. That would be just my simple way. You should get a stuffed dog if you just want something to look at periodically. Don't get a living one that requires interaction. Get one that's stuffed. There's lots of cute ones out there. Of course, other signs of illness, if a dog's having diarrhea or a dog has open wounds, again we go back to the chain wounds around the neck that from dogs that have been tied, or the collar's been on too long, they've never removed the collar, never cleaned it, and any kind of wounds, whether it's cane knives or whatever, there's lots of different ways to get wounds. Those are also signs of neglect is probably more than anything. Yeah.
If you know of animals being abused, call your nearest animal welfare organization, the police, and in this day and age, utilize the help of social media and the pages created to raise awareness. There are a number of people that are out there willing to help in ways like transportation and medical costs, so please reach out before it's too late. Document everything you see and report it. The more information you have, the more useful the information will be to law enforcement. You may even leave the information anonymously if need be. Animal abuse affects all of us. Anyone who abuses animals may abuse and harm people, and that is not the society that we want to live in. So, what are some of the ways that we can stop animal abuse from happening? Well, first and foremost, stand up for animals. Educate yourselves on the topic of animal cruelty and recognize and acknowledge when you do see it happening and fight for them.
We need to get community leaders, we need to get government involved, we need to not just make laws, but we need to make bylaws. Locally, the communities can do something about it, and we need to have policing. How are we going to enact this? How are we going to enforce this? How do we make sure that those people who are posting garbage, terrible things online, how do we make sure that they learn not to do that?
There's a famous saying by actor Johnny Depp that goes, if you don't like seeing pictures of violence towards animals being posted, you need to help stop the violence, not the pictures. You can help save the lives of animals in your area by reporting the abuse and using social media platforms to highlight the problem and seek assistance. Another way to help animals is to get your pets desexed. This way, hundreds and even thousands of abused and unwanted animals won't end up in cages in animal shelters and in town council animal trapping programs. This way, you will help improve the quality of life for not only animals, but people too. To learn more about desexing, head to our Pet Project YouTube channel to watch our previous episodes highlighting these issues. Now, right on the other side of this commercial break, it's not all bad. Social media has shown us some pretty heartwarming human and animal interactions. That's coming up. It's time for our pet TikTok stars. A lot of us absolutely love and adore our fur children, and as the saying goes, don't treat animals like animals. Treat them like living beings, because that's what they are. And our next TikTok stars sure do treat their pets with a lot of love.
So one day I saw this comment, really don't do that, on a pet group page here in Fiji of someone saying that Fijian street dogs, like my dog Ili, cannot be trained because they are not intelligent, because they come from the street. So to that person, I don't know who they are, I hope you see this video, because my dog, wait till you see her tricks. She's trained in 2 languages, by the way, kind of. Okay, here's her tricks. Oh, come on. Dabe. Lulu. Cookie. Dabe. Get up here. Good job. Look at me. Yeah. Okay. Trained Fijian street dog.
Bola everybody, bola TikTok family, bola views. Makanganyo sa post ako dyan yung nanero video ko kay Rexy. This is Rexy. Sa urukan no Rexy. Baka naman ray, patigay na. Take a look, everybody. Set. This is how we treat our dog. Okay, Rexy. Awa Wawa kun bokana. Wawa chiko dambe. Oli sa bato ko, wawa. 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 Kumbokan na wawa. Ano sumayigikan na wawa. Setrexicana. Yes. Nice, eh? Dabirang tabi. Dabirang ikan, ang tabi. Dabirang ikan. Siang, ang dabirang. Tabi. Tabi. Kan. Rexy, my, dambe, dambira, dambe, kentabo, set, modesara.
We sincerely hope that our message tonight has resonated with you and inspired you to stand up and fight for our animal friends. They need us, and it is our duty to look after them, not to harm them. We'll see you for our season finale next week. Till then, make a difference. Be kind to animals.